Good morning, and welcome to the pre-reg exam workshop. This workshop is purely aimed at assisting you prepare for the upcoming pre-registrations exams. So I hope we are ready. This session is going to be approximately 3 hours. Please do stay with us until the end because we do share new information that is required for you to know for the exams. Use the Q&A function on Teams or the comment section if you are joining on YouTube for you to raise whatever concerns, whatever questions you might have for us to then attend to them. We will, towards the end of the presentation, share the link to the attendance register and also the survey for you to raise whatever concerns you had about the entire presentations. So please do also make sure that you fill both the attendance register and the survey to the workshop. Once we have concluded today's presentation, along with the one for Saturday, we will then do a bit of cleaning and make them available on the website. Currently, we do have the 2024 presentation available there in case you want to refresh on anything. Again, welcome. So for today, what we will do is firstly, I will hand over to our COO for her to welcome you. And then you will be speaking to myself most of the time, Ms. Lisbeth Gumede. I will also be handing over to Prof. Steenenkamp, who will assist with preparing and also some examples on the calculation section. Then we'll hand over to Dr. Johnston, who will take you through the general section. As you know that the pre-reg exam is a total of 120 questions. However, they are split into two. So we have the calculations, that's where Prof. Steenenkamp comes in, and then we have the general, that's where Dr. Johnston comes in. I will now hand over to the COO for her to welcome us. Thank you very much. Apologies for that. We seem to be having a bit of a technical challenge with our COO joining. So we will continue so long, and then she will join us as we go along, and then she will be given an opportunity to address you. So in the meeting right now, we have, like I said, Prof. Steenenkamp, who will be taking you through the calculation questions, and then Dr. Deanne Johnston will be taking you through the general section. These are our moderators and examiners, so they are very involved in the generation of these questions. So whatever information they will be telling you is what they had taken into account when they were setting the questions, and also what they'll be taking into account when they are moderating the exam after you have written the exam. And then also joining us a bit later on is Ms. Kamohelo Malaku, who is the senior manager for the department, and you've been speaking to myself, Lisbeth Gumede. So when we look at the actual examination itself, like I said before, it is a total of 120 multiple choice questions. It is split over the 2 days. So on the first day, you're doing the calculation sections, right, over a period of 2 hours. And for this paper, you need to get a sub minimum of 60% for you to pass this section. Then on day 2, you write the general section, which is over a period of 2.5 hours, and you need to get a sub minimum of 50% to be able to pass this section. And also please note that the pre-registration practice exam is a prerequisite. It is compulsory for you to write the pre-reg exam before you write the actual exam. This is because the pre-reg exam parameters are exactly the same as the actual exam, so it's aimed at giving you a feel of how it would be like to actually write the actual exam. Our next practice exam is on the 3rd of June in preparation for the August exam, and once the bookings for that have opened, you will be notified for you to write the practice exam. And when you are writing the practice exam, you need to make sure that the environment under which you are writing that exam is going to be the same as the actual exam, so that you do not experience any sudden changes. And for you to be able to pass the exam, you need to write both sections. So it's one paper, it's just split over 2 days to allow you more time to write, but then it is not 2 separate papers. So for you to pass the actual pre-reg exam, you need to have written both papers. So the paper covers all the different sectors of pharmacy, being community, institutional, manufacturing, and wholesale. The questions are a mixture of all of those sectors. They are not specified and they're not sector specific. So our examiners and our moderators are from these different sectors. So within that 120 question paper, you will see that you will have questions that are institutional, community, manufacturing, and wholesale. Right? So you need then to familiarize yourself with the 6 domains that you're currently using for your CPDs, because those questions are still based on those 6 domains that you are seeing on the platform when you are now submitting your portfolio of evidence. Speaking of those 6 domains, you will see that the questions are split across those 6 domains, right? And then when you look at domain 3, for example, 33% of the paper is from there, whereas 27.5 is from domain 2, and then 15.8 is from domain 1, with 16.67 being from domain 5, 1.67 from domain 6, and so forth. So you need to be able to understand those domains, right? And then have content specific for those domains. I hope that was clear. I will now hand over to Prof. Steenekamp for us to then begin with the preparations for the calculation section. Prof. Steenekamp, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gumede. From my side to the interns, welcome. I'm going to highlight some few aspects that I think is important for your preparation in terms of the calculations. As said, the paper is compiled based on the competency standards, and there are 6 domains. However, for the calculations section, the questions are from domains 1 to 4, and that's based on that certain domains cannot be tested with calculations. Next slide, please. That brings us to the types of questions that you can expect. And as these slides are going to be available, you can run through it, but you will see that we cover different types of questions: health economics questions on patient medicine review, on medicines and medical devices, therapeutic outcome monitoring, and pharmacist-initiated therapy. Next slide, please. Similarly, you will see questions from competency standard domains 3. We cover medicine production, supply chain management, formulary development, medicine dispensing, compounding, as well as questions on financial management. Next slide, please. Okay, important. I know that people want to refer back to books, but a tip of or a piece of advice in terms of prepping for the calculations paper. There are textbooks, and these textbooks are more valuable in your prep time before the exam. You are welcome to bring the books to the exam venue or where you are going to write. However, you should be very mindful on the time limit. You do not have time to check and look for a specific calculation in a textbook. So use the textbook beforehand to prep for your exams. What's also important, if you use textbooks or any other source for that matter, please make sure that the calculations are applicable to the South African context, because you are going to be tested on calculation relevant to the South African context. Important, be mindful of the units that are asked for the questions so that you are sure to convert between different units. And as I said, be mindful of your time. You should manage it very well. Next slide, please. When you practice your calculations, please do not memorize the calculations. It's much more valuable if you understand the principles. So when you prep, do make sure that you understand the principles. And I've already referred to the SI units. Make sure that you know what it means. For instance, percentage weight per volume means the number of grams of a substance per 100 ml of solution. If you want to use equations, make sure that you know them. Make sure that you know, and this is very important, that you know when to use which formula. For instance, C1V1 equals C2V2 is a formula that you are very familiar with, and that's used when you do simple dilutions. That brings me to the equipment that you need within the venue. The first thing, please remember to have your calculator with you. Make sure that you are aware of how to use the calculator. Please do not bring a new calculator to the exam day. Use the one that you have used during your prep or practicing before the exam. Check the batteries. You don't want the calculator to die on you during the exam due to a flat battery. Make sure that you have enough paper for rough work and that you have a pen or a pencil to do your rough work and do the calculations before you answer. Next slide, please. From previous examples and exams, we do know that sometimes interns do struggle with conversions. So on this slide, you will see a picture or an image that show you how to convert. For this one, it is weights. On the left-hand side, you will see you start with microgram, then to milligram, then to gram, and then to kilogram. To interpret this, very easy. If you want to convert from microgram to milligram, you work with the arrows indicating in black and you divide by 1,000. Similarly, to convert from milligram to gram, once again, you divide by 1,000. Let's say you want to convert the other way around, from kilograms, for instance, to grams. Then you multiply the kilogram value by 1,000 to get the corresponding value in grams. Similarly, if you want to convert from milligrams to microgram, you multiply the milligram number with 1,000 to get to micrograms. Next slide, please. As with weights, we have a similar conversion chart for volumes. It starts with microliter on the left-hand side, then goes to milliliters, to liters, to kiloliters. It works exactly the same. So make sure that you know how to convert. It's unnecessary to lose marks by doing incorrect conversions. And if it will be helpful for you, you are free to have these conversion charts with you in the exam, just to fresh up or make sure if you're uncertain. But I would advise you to be very careful when you convert and that you know how to convert before entering the exam. Next slide, please. Some more tips in the exam. Make sure that you use the correct formula. That means that you will have to practice beforehand and identify which formula goes with which type of calculation. In the examples that we are going to cover a bit later, you will see there are formulas that we're going to use, and I'll indicate which one do we use when. When you transcribe, double check you're transcribing against the question, that you do not make a mistake and that you have used the correct figures in your formula. And a valuable tip is, let's say you need to calculate the volume of a cup. For instance, estimate your answer. Know that you should have an answer about of 250 mils. If you get 2.5 liters, you know the answer is incorrect. And double check your calculations, please. Next slide. The paper consists of 40 questions for calculation. They are MCQs. You have 2 hours or 120 minutes to do them. That equates to about 3 minutes per question. It might happen that you're going to spend more than 3 minutes on a more difficult question, but all the questions are not going to take up 3 minutes of your time. So if you work with the calculation, you say, okay, on this one I used 4 minutes, relax, you will make up time at a quicker calculation. And important, no negative marking will be applied, and please answer all the questions, even if it means that you have to guess an answer. Don't leave it blank, but do not guess all your answers. This is only for emergency cases that you need to guess. Right, next slide, please. That brings us to the examples. Our first example, a 55-year-old male patient is stabilized on warfarin 5 milligrams daily at a cost of 28.80 Rand per month. The patient has his INR monitored weekly at a cost of 117.70 per test. The patient has heard about rivaroxaban from his doctor and wants to know the cost implications. The cost of rivaroxaban is 50 milligram daily is 637.95 Rand per month. What is the difference in cost between these two options? Before we go to the memo for this question, when you do read a question, before you start writing on it, make sure that you understand what is asked with a question. For instance, in this question, patient asked on 2 different treatments, warfarin versus rivaroxaban, and he wants to know what will be the cost difference actually between the 2 options. Now we can go to the answer, please. For the warfarin treatment, there are 2 aspects. It's the warfarin tablets, that is 28.80 Rand per month. Then this patient have a weekly test that is 117.70 Rand times 4 for the 4 weeks and a month. So the total cost for the warfarin treatment is therefore the 28.80 Rand plus the 470.80 Rand, and that equates to 499.60 Rand. The rivaroxaban cost has no test. It's only the medicine, which is 637.95 Rand. So the cost difference will therefore be 138.35 Rand. So it means that the rivaroxaban treatment is 138.35 Rand more a month in comparison to the warfarin treatment, and that will be your answer for this question. Next question. In example 2, if we read quickly through it, a patient requires an intravenous infusion of 0.9% weight per volume sodium chloride. In your hospital pharmacy department, you have water for injection BP and 4.5% weight per volume sodium chloride solution BP. Assuming no volume displacement effects, what volume of the 4.5% weight per volume sodium chloride solution BP needs to be added aseptically to an expandable PVC infusion bag containing 100 ml water for injection BP to produce the required sodium chloride concentration. Okay, before we go to the memo for this question. The question seems to be complex. So make sure that you understand it. And what I normally suggest is break it up. You will see in this question that we have a patient and we need 0.9% weight per volume sodium chloride. However, we do not have that. We have only a 4.5% weight per volume sodium chloride solution, and we have water for injection. So we need to go from a 4.5% sodium chloride solution to a 0.9%. This, therefore, is a dilution calculation. So let's quickly take a look at the memo. In this question, you will see that alligation was applied. And the reason is why. It is because we have three different strengths that we have to work with. The 4.5% weight per volume sodium chloride solution and the 0.9% sodium chloride solution. That's the two strengths that's applicable to the sodium chloride solution. However, in this example, you will see there suddenly appears a 0% at the top left corner. And that refers to the water for injection. The strengths that are depicted here refers to sodium chloride content. And water for injection has a 0% because it is a diluent. When you do a calculation by alligation, there's a certain way that you need to plot your values. The strength that you need, always in the middle, always. There's two strengths that you are going to use to do the preparation, comes to the left-hand side of the middle. Doesn't matter if the 0 or the 4.5% is on top, you can go either way. For this calculation, we've put the 0% on the top. So then you proceed as follows. You do subtraction. 0% minus 0.9% gives you 0.9 parts. 4.5% minus 0.9% gives you 3.6 parts. Remember, your answers that you will get always will be in parts. So how do I interpret this? It means that you need 3.6 parts of the diluent, water for injection, and you need 0.9 parts of the 4.5%. Now, somewhere there should be a volume given in the calculation. And you will remember we had 100 moles of the water for injection. So water for injection will therefore be represented by 3.6 parts. Then you can do a normal calculation. If 100 ml represents 3.6 parts, therefore 0.9 parts will be represented by how many milliliters, and you will do the calculation and it will be 25 milliliters. So what does it mean? It means that you need to take 25 ml of the 4.5% weight per volume solution of sodium chloride and then add it to the 100 ml expandable bag that contains 100 moles of water for injection. And then the strength of this solution will be 0.9% weight per volume sodium chloride. Okay, next slide, please. In the next slide, it's the third example. And let's quickly read through it. Given that the relative molecular mass of sodium chloride is 58.5 grams per mole, what amount of sodium chloride powder is required to prepare 300 moles of a solution containing 50 millimoles per liter? Okay, before we go to the memo, we need to break this up. This is a fairly simple calculation. We work with sodium chloride. We want to know how much sodium chloride should be used to prepare a solution that contains 50 millimoles per liter of sodium chloride. However, we're not going to prepare a liter. We're only going to prepare 300 milliliters. We can go to the memo. First off, you need to know your definitions. You need to know what millimoles per liter mean. Millimoles per liter mean that you take the number of the molecular mass of sodium chloride, which is 58.5 grams per mole, but we're working with a millimole, that's a thousandths. So it will be milligrams. 58.5 milligrams is 1 millimole. We're not going to prepare a solution that contains only 1 millimole. We're going to prepare a solution that contains 50 millimoles. So you need to multiply the 58.5 milligrams by 50, and that will give you 2,925 milligrams. So if I take that and I add that in a liter of solution and prepare a liter of the solution, that will be 350 millimoles per liter of sodium chloride. Important, we're not going to prepare a full liter of solution. The question asks only for 300 moles. So you need to do a proportion calculation. If it's 2,925 milligrams of sodium chloride to a liter for 50 millimoles per liter, how much do I need for only 300 moles? It should be about a third of that, and that will be 877.5 milligrams of sodium chloride. So how do I prepare this? You dissolve the 877.5 milligram of sodium chloride in water and make up to a final volume of 300 moles, then you will have the correct strength of the sodium chloride. Next slide, please. Okay, this calculation in example 4 seems to be complex because there's a lot of info provided on the slide. So let's quickly read through it and then break it up in bite-sized fractions. A pharmacist receives the following prescription: ephedrine hydrochloride, 0.5 grams, chlorobutanol, 0.25 grams, dextrose anhydrous, QS, a sufficient quantity, and purified water up to a volume of 50 milliliters. The question asks, how many grams of anhydrous dextrose should be used in compounding the prescription to make an isotonic solution? And then in the bottom paragraph, there is information supplied. The sodium chloride equivalent for a 1% weight per volume solution of ephedrine hydrochloride is 0.3, and for a 1% weight per volume solution of chlorobutanol is 0.24, and for a 1% solution of anhydrous dextrose is 0.18. So before we go to the memo, this is clearly a calculation on tonicity. They ask you to prepare an isotonic solution, and we further can see is that we're going to use the sodium equivalent method to prepare this solution. We can go to the memo. So what you need to do here is calculate the sodium equivalents for the two ingredients in the preparation, the ephedrine hydrochloride and the chlorobutanol. So in the information provided, we can see that what the sodium equivalent for ephedrine hydrochloride is 0.3 grams of sodium chloride. So it means the equivalent quantity for 1 gram of ephedrine hydrochloride is 0.3 grams of sodium chloride. In the recipe or the formula, we have only 0.5 gram of ephedrine hydrochloride. So therefore, what will be the sodium equivalent? That is 0.15 grams of sodium chloride. Similarly for the chlorobutanol. The equivalent is 1 gram of chlorobutanol is equivalent to 0.24 grams of sodium chloride. In the recipe or formula, we have 0.25 grams of chlorobutanol. So what will be the sodium equivalent or sodium chloride equivalent? It will be 0.06 grams of sodium chloride. So the total sodium equivalent for this formula will therefore be 0.15 grams plus 0.06 grams. That equates to 0.21 grams of sodium chloride. Now the question is that enough or is it not enough? From theory, we know that an isotonic solution of sodium chloride contains 0.9 grams of sodium chloride per 100 moles of solution. However, our solution is only 50 moles. So 0.45 grams of sodium chloride will be isotonic. We only have in our formulation 0.21 grams of sodium chloride equivalent. So what do we still need? It is 0.45 grams minus 0.21 grams of sodium chloride, and that gives you 0.24 grams of sodium chloride. So we need still 0.24 grams of sodium chloride. However, you're not going to make this solution isotonic with sodium chloride. You need to use anhydrous dextrose. So similarly, we need to calculate the sodium chloride equivalent. We know that 1 grams of anhydrous dextrose is equivalent to 0.1 grams of sodium chloride. We need 0.24 grams of sodium chloride. So what will be the equivalent weight of anhydrous dextrose? And you will see the answer is 1.33 grams of anhydrous dextrose. So this means when you prepare this formulation, you will add 1.33 grams of anhydrous dextrose and make up to a final volume of 50 milliliters. And then this formulation will be isotonic. Next slide. Example 5. If we read through this one, calculate the quantity of sodium chloride that should be added to 150 ml of a 1% weight per volume solution of apomorphine hydrochloride to render the solution isotonic with blood plasma. The freezing point of depression of a 1% weight per volume solution of the drug and sodium chloride is 0.08 and 0.58 degrees Celsius respectively. Before we go to the memo. Similar to the previous calculation, this one is also a tonicity calculation. However, the calculation works a bit differently. You will remember from the previous slide, that was on the sodium chloride equivalent method. This one is based on freezing point depression. Next slide, please. There is a formula that you can memorize or bring on a piece of paper to the venue. When you have a freezing point depression calculation, you're going to use the equation that's indicated here. W equals 0.52 minus A divided by B. But before you can use this formula, you need to know what the symbols mean. Let's start off with the W. W stands for the amount of adjusting substance that you're going to use to render a solution isotonic. And the units will be grams per 100 ml or percentage weight per volume. A will be the freezing point depression of the solution that you need to make isotonic. And remember from the calculation, it is 0.08. And B will be the freezing point depression value of a 1% solution of the adjusting substance. In this case, we're going to use sodium chloride. If you substitute the values into the equation, 0.52 minus 0.08 divided by 0.58, that gives you an answer of 0.758% weight per volume or grams per 100 ml. This means that if you need to prepare 100 ml of the solution, you're going to use 0.758 grams of adjusting substance. However, the question asks not for 100 ml of solution, but for 150 ml. So if you do a proportion calculation, you will get to an answer of 1.137 grams of sodium chloride. So this means if you prep the solution and you need to make 150 mils of it as is requested, you will need to add a quantity of 1.137 grams of sodium chloride during preparation. And then the solution will be isotonic and will have a freezing point depression value of 0.52 degrees Celsius. Next slide, please. Example 6. And I think this is the last calculations example. And you will see in this question, there is a number of concepts that's not encountered frequently. Let's start by reading it. How many milliequivalents of potassium ion are there in a 250 milligram penicillin V potassium tablet? And there's a note provided as well. The molecular weight of PenV is 388.48. There is one potassium ion in the molecule and the valence of potassium is 1. Okay, we can quickly go to the memo. Okay, there are different approaches that you may use to calculate the answer for this question. The answer that is, or the method that's depicted on this slide is the one that I normally use, and it works every time. And if you understand it, it works very well. When you get a milliequivalent calculation, there are two aspects or two different calculations that you need to do before you do your final one. The first one will be, you need to calculate the number of milliequivalents per millimole for the substance. And that you do by taking the valence of either the positive or negative species and multiply that by the number of that specific species. For this calculation, we have the valence provided of potassium. So we know the valence is 1, and you use the absolute value. And you need to know how many potassiums there are in a molecule of PenV. There's only one that was also provided. So the number of milliequivalents per millimole is 1. The next calculation that you're going to need to do is you need to calculate the equivalent weight of the substance. And there's a formula for that as well. The equivalent weight is given by the molecular weight represented in milligrams per millimole divided by the number of milliequivalents per millimole. And the number of milliequivalents per millimole is what we have calculated just in the previous calculation. So what you do here, the molecular mass has been provided. So it's 388.48 milligrams per millimole divided by 1 milliequivalent per millimole. And that gives you the equivalent weight of PenV. And that will be 388.48 milligrams per milliequivalent. Okay, before we go further, we need to know what this means. It means if you want 1 milliequivalent of potassium, you will have to weigh off 388.48 milligrams for 1 milliequivalent. However, this question states that you need to calculate the number of milliequivalents in 250 milligrams of PenV. So once again, you do the calculation. You know that if 1 milliequivalent weighs 388.48 milligrams, therefore 250 milligrams of PenV will represent how many milliequivalents of potassium, and you will see it is 0.644 milligrams of potassium in terms of milliequivalents. So it's 0.644 milliequivalent. So it's not a complete 1 milliequivalent because it's less than the 388.48 milligrams. I know that people do normally struggle with calculations on milliequivalents, but if you use this approach, where you firstly calculate the milliequivalents per millimole, and then the equivalent weight, and then proceed to what is asked, you will get to the correct answer. And I think this was the last example. and we have time for some questions.
Prof, we have a couple of questions already.
Okay.
The first one is, to qualify for the exam, does it mean that I need to have submitted 6 CPDs by June and be competent in 3, or submitted 6 and competent in 3 by before the end of August exam?
I think those questions will be answered at the end of the session, because that does not relate specifically to the calculations, but rather on what needs to be done in terms of your CPDs.
Thanks, Prof. The next question is also about CPDs in the exam. So attendees, if you would like to ask a question relating to calculations, please type your question in the Q&A section on Teams, or if you're joining us on YouTube, please type it in the comment section. We will read all the questions.
Also, please note that we will have a specific section not so long from now where we will address the criteria for the exam, how to prepare for the exam, and all of those things. So some of these questions might even be answered before we get to the final Q&A. So for now, if we could please focus on only questions relating to the calculations, and then we will deal with the criteria for the exam and the CPDs and the deadlines once we are done with the calculation and the general section. Thank you. All right, if we do not have any calculation questions, that is fine. Prof will be with us for a little bit longer. So what I would suggest we do now is we can take a 10-minute break. So we should be back and ready to start at say 5 to 10. So let's take a 10-minute break, stretch, get our coffees, our fruits, whatever, and then be back and ready to continue with the general section at 5 to. In the meantime, within this period, if you get any questions, please do type them in the Q&A section or at the comment section on YouTube. And then when we come back, Prof can start with them before we continue. Otherwise, we will continue with the general section. Thank you very much. See you at 5 to 10. All right, welcome back. Our 12-minute break is over. Ned, could you please confirm for me if we have any calculation questions on the chat?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yes, we do have a couple.
Okay.
Will we be allowed to enter the exam with a formula sheet of our own?
Yes.
Is the pass rate high for the calculations?
Yes, the sub minimum is 60%.
For the example 2 calculations, subtracting 0.9% from 0% gives us a negative 0.9%. What's the rationale for dropping the negative sign in our calculation?
Which example is this? Example 2.
Example 2, we can quickly go there. Okay, let's go to the memo. If you keep the sign, you will give minus 3.6 parts, which does not make sense at all. So when you do calculations using allegation, you work with the absolute difference. That's the reason for dropping the sign.
Thanks, Prof. Where can we get more examples regarding calculations to practice?
They can use that textbook by Stoklosa and Ansel. It is one of the resources that was depicted on that, yes, the book right top, Howard Ansel's book. Any edition of that book will work. It has a lot of examples on calculations, and I do think there is an example paper available on the SAPC site as well. Maybe SAPC can just confirm.
Yes, Prof, we do have a paper available on the website. So if the interns go into the website, the intern portal, they should be able to see some of the calculation questions in there, Prof.
Thank you.
Are these the hardest questions?
In terms of the calculations selected on this slide, the selection was based on the type of calculations that the interns normally do experience as difficult. So when we analyze the papers, we normally see the interns struggle with tonicity calculations, they do struggle with molecular weight calculations, and they do struggle with equivalent weights or milliequivalent. So yes, that is typically the more difficult questions that interns do struggle with. But rather than asking, is this the most difficult, it goes to the principle. Interns struggle with the principle. So if you understand the principle, I can ask you almost any type of question. If you have the principle and you are able to apply the principle, you will be able to do the calculation.
Can you please explain the variables in example 5 again?
Can we quickly go to example 5? All right, this calculation relates to freezing point depression. So if we take a look at the equation on the top of the slide, it reads W equals minus 0.52 minus A divided by B. So let's start with the W. W is the answer that you're going to get in terms of percentage weight per volume, which is the same as grams per 100 ml. And that will be the quantity of adjusting substance that you're going to use to make the solution isotonic. In this case, it was the sodium chloride. That brings us to symbol A. Symbol A will be the freezing point depression of the solution at hand. And B will be the freezing point depression value of a 1% weight per volume solution of the adjusting substance. Can we go to the question of this problem, please? You will see what is provided is the adjusting substance, in this case is sodium chloride, and the freezing point depression value is provided, 0.58 degrees Celsius. The other value is the freezing point depression value of the solution that you need to make isotonic. In this case, it was 0.08. So if we go to the formula again on the next slide, you will see A is substituted with 0.08 because that's the solution that we need to make isotonic, the freezing point depression value of that 1% solution. And then B will be the freezing point depression value of the adjusting substance, a 1% solution of that, and that will be 0.58. Is that clear? If the intern can just give me an heads up so that I do know that it's clear now.
Thanks, Prof. While we wait for the intern, the last question in this section, can we please have another workshop specifically focused only on calculation questions and how to go about answering them, because the calculations seem to be difficult?
I don't mind, but I think that is a question that council needs to answer.
That is a request that we can definitely take into consideration. However, we will not be able to give a final response right now because of the extent of planning that would need to take place prior to that. But it will definitely be discussed and communication will be given as feedback after the workshop. Or yeah, communication via email.
Apologies, there is another question. If we work through the relevant sections of the pharmaceutical calculations textbook, the 15th edition, will it be sufficient in preparation for the calculations, or what else can we do to prepare?
My honest opinion is if you can do the calculations that is presented in pharmaceutical calculations and you understand the principles, you will be able to answer the questions in the paper to a sufficient extent that you will do very well. But that means you need to understand the principle. Please do not memorize the calculations.
Thank you very much for the Q&A. Like I said, Prof is still around. So if there's another question relating to calculation, please do continue noting it in the chat. However, for now, since we do not have any other question, what we will do is I will now hand over to Deanne for her to take you through the general section, and then we will do another Q&A wherein it will mostly focus on the general section. However, if there are calculation questions, you can then still include them there before we go into the nitty-gritties of the exam. Dr. Deanne, over to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and good morning, interns. Elizabeth, I hope you don't mind, but I have taken over sharing of the screen.
No worries.
So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the pre-reg intern workshop. This is a wonderful opportunity for the interns to engage with Pharmacy Council, as well as the examiners and moderators, to get a true understanding of what is coming your way. But we have to really emphasize that it's too soon to panic. And to take all the tips and advice that we're giving to you today and try to use this to really prepare well for the upcoming exam. So I know that often the thought is that the calculation section is more difficult, but I don't want you to ignore the general questions, because the general questions is maybe not about the difficulty of the questions, but it's certainly about having the right references and resources and making sure that you can answer the questions in the required time. So as we looked at the blueprint right at the beginning, and calculation sections, the calculation questions were only from a few domains, we see that there is quite a wide variety of questions within the general section. And these come from all 6 domains, with the majority coming from domain 1, domain 2, and domain 5. This really means that you must have a look at the references that you're taking in to ensure that you've covered enough of these domains. So you need to just make sure that you are looking at this examination holistically and then matching the questions to the resources that you're going to go through and prepare with and have on hand during the exam. Okay, so what references may you use? So you can use physical copies of textbooks and study notes. So this is really important. So these would maybe be textbooks that you have or reference sources that you have from the Pharmacy Council, from your pharmacy that you work at. So one word of advice though about study notes and notes from university is sometimes there's been updates to legislation or changes in policies, or even study notes can sometimes be wrong. So make sure that you're matching the references that you're taking in to those domains that we had a look at and ensuring that it is the best resource that you can have to answer those questions. We're going to have a look at PDF references because majority of your resources, I surmise, is going to be on these PDF resources. So that's important. There are some resources which Pharmacy Council provides on the SAPC website. And these you also will be able to access during the exams as downloads within the browser. So what we would suggest is that you start downloading these during the practice exam and that you have all of these on hand so that you don't have to waste any time during the exam trying to find these documents. And then there are some online permitted websites, and we'll go through that. So it's very important that you have a look at the variety of resources that you have and that you don't waste time in the exam struggling to find these resources. And that's also why we have a practice exam, so that you can make sure that within your exam venue or the desk or wherever you're going to take the exam, you have got everything positioned. You know where you're going to put your books. You know how much space you need, etc., etc. So you've worked out all of that. You've downloaded all the material. Remember that we never know what's going to happen on your day of the exam. You don't know if the internet may be slightly slower. So make sure that as much preparation as you could have done before time has taken place and that you've looked at all these resources. Because the biggest thing about resources is not that you have found the resources, but you know what you can find in those resources. So 2 questions you always need to consider when you are answering questions and finding your resources. The first thing you need to say is it current? So you know that as soon as we have book versions of a resource document, and I'm going to use the SAMF as an example, because a number of students would have bought this when they were a BPharm student at university. So that SAMF is likely going to be out of date already. So the latest scheduling information would not be available in that resource. So that's the first bit of advice. You've got to make sure, is it the last and the most current version available? The next question is it relevant to the South African setting? So we've already talked about the calculation resources and using books that are published. And the one drawback sometimes about using information, especially for calculations, is that they use different SI units. And likewise, if we are looking at more clinical information or practice information, it has to be clinical guidelines that are applicable to the South African context. Are these ones that are recommended by the Department of Health? And is it something that we follow within our context? The drugs, etc., are they relevant to our setting? Are they registered with SAHPRA? And are they applicable to South Africa in 2025? So that's really important. Okay, so what I would suggest is after you have finished today's workshop, is take a look at the resources that you can find on the SAPC website. So these are all the resources that you would be able to find. So having a look here, the big things is, well, is the Good Pharmacy Practice Manual and associated rules. South Africans, so the SA Guide to Good Manufacturing Practice. Then we've got our standard treatment guidelines and the National Drug Policy. All of that can be found under the intern page on the SAPC website. When you open up these documents, you can download a copy. So download this and put it in a way, systematically organize it so that you would be able to find this. So what I would suggest is that on your computer or laptop, etc., you would have a file that would say maybe legislation. And then you would have one that maybe is more applicable to manufacturing or GMP. So have one that's a separate file for that. Then maybe have one that's more clinical, so the South African treatment guidelines. So try to organize the information in a way that you would be able to find it quite easily on the day. So if we just dump all of these documents into one file, you have to often search and go through that in order to open up the documents. So think about how you're going to work in the exam and make sure that you've got your resources organized accordingly. So these are the resources that you would be able to find on the SAPC website. You would click on persons, registered persons, click on pharmacist intern, and then move over here on this ribbon to manual, and under manual, you've got these important documents. So have a look here. Remember that these over here are treatment guidelines, and these are PDF copies. So if there's been any updates since then, it would not reflect in the PDF copy. And I'm going to show you a little bit later about where you would be able to access information more online. So through like an app that then shows the standard treatment guidelines. So for example, EM Guidance would most likely give a more updated version of the South African treatment guidelines. Okay, another tab that's very, very important is to have a look right at the top here with these orange, these 5 orange circles, is to go to the one in the middle, which is represented by a book. So the 2 important tabs here, one is legislation and 2 is pharmacia. So legislation encompasses the acts, the regulations, the board notices, the board notices, etc., etc., etc. The pharmacia is a more, it takes the information and the changes that are happening within our profession, and it's often published in more of a like a magazine type or article type format. Okay, so what I would suggest is that you read the pharmacia before you write the exam. So read the pharmacia for the last, and it won't take that long. So read the pharmacia and make sure that you are up to date with the changes that are happening within our profession. You can then open up under legislation the various documents that have been updated. Okay, so let's take a look more at legislation. So the first thing is acts, regulations, rules, board notices, and proposed legislation. So Pharmacy Council contains the Pharmacy Act. What we would suggest is that likewise, as you are going through the legislation here and referring to the Pharmacy Act, you would also go onto the SAHPRA website and have a look at the Medicine and Related Substances Act, as well as the general regulations. So what I'm showing you here is just the resources that we have through the SAPC website. But make sure that you're also visiting SAHPRA and having a look at the relevant acts. Another note is that there's often additional acts, such as the Hazardous Substances Act, the Liquor Act, etc., which may be a question or 2 in the exam. We'll speak more about the blueprinting of the exam, but just make sure that you know where to find all of this legislation. Okay, so the Pharmacy Act, the next would be the regulations. So remember that the Act is, it doesn't have a lot of meat to it. So it provides the legislation, but it doesn't give us like the nitty-gritty or more details of that. We find the more detailed information within the regulations and then within the guidelines. So you would see that you've got to understand the information that would be provided in the Act. But if it's more about our day-to-day practice, we'd have to go to the regulations or the GPP. Okay, so make sure that you've opened up all the regulations, and just there should be like a light bulb moment going on now, because we had quite a lot of updates to regulations last year. We had updates to the practice regulations, as well as to the training, to the education and training regulations. Remember that we added in the scope of practice, we added in pharmacy technician, and there were a number of changes that then followed due to these updates. So make sure that you have gone onto the website and read especially the latest legislation as well, which you may not be familiar with because most likely when you were at university, you weren't these regulations hadn't been signed in, and therefore your lecturers may have hinted that there were changes coming, but you most likely weren't examined on these changes. Okay, so then the rules. So we have the GPP, but remember the GPP is a consolidation of all of the rules. So there may be updates. So for example, let's take a look at Board Notice 699 of 2024. This is products that may not be sold in a pharmacy. The GPP has this information, but it is outdated at the moment because there's been a more recent update. We do know that the GPP is likely to be updated and consolidated soon, but that again is a PDF copy. So the date in which they updated the GPP, those were when the latest changes were then incorporated within the GPP. But because Council is so busy updating, and we've got so many regular updates to how we practice, we've got to make sure that we don't only take into consideration the GPP, but also what are the latest board notices. So absolutely, you should be reading through all of the board notices, and that you are aware, at least in your mind, you need to be aware of maybe some of the changes that have happened. Okay, so these are the rules. Then we've got our board notices as well. So here we've got a lot of our competency standards have been updated recently. So make sure that you've read through and know the type of information that is available under each of these tabs. The only tab that you really don't need to pay attention to at this stage for the exam, but definitely for practice, is what may be signed into legislation in the new, like in the near future. So under proposed legislation, these are all of the board notices that are out for comment, and these could be changes that may be signed into effect. For the examination, we do not test proposed legislation. So we don't test what may change in the future. We test it as it is at that point in time. Okay, so you won't need to learn anything under proposed legislation. You don't need to download any of that. But absolutely, please take into consideration and make sure that you are familiar with the Act, regulations, rules, and board notices. Okay, so books, as mentioned, books are really important, but we know that a lot of us have moved towards digital copies of reference material. When we are using books, make sure that you know where the index is. So, and this sounds a bit strange, but sometimes if you're using a MIMS desk reference, or if you're using certain books, you need to understand what information is there and how do I quickly reference that? So how do I look up a package insert, professional information for a specific product? So make sure that you're familiar with that. The next thing is that I need to understand what information I can find in each reference. So when I wrote my intern exam way a long time ago, I remember that people literally brought suitcases into the exam with all their reference material. Now, more is not necessarily better. And even if you've got this on your computer, unless you've organized your references in a systematic way, it doesn't always help to have more references at your disposal, but rather look at the types of information, where you're going to find that information, and just an easy way that you can use it. Okay. So again, we're going to stress that you should download your references beforehand, that it is quite time consuming to search references during the exam. So make sure that you're very familiar with the control find function and that you can easily access this information. Remember, you don't want to waste time. And the information that you find, so for example, online references may not correlate to the recommended reference material. So we do issue a list of recommended material, like recommended resources that you should access and be familiar with. But if you had to use, for example, an international textbook or an American textbook on that topic, it may not correlate with the resources that we have used. So what we would suggest is that you really try to use these resources, and that you're not going to, especially when it comes to the clinical stuff, is that you're not going to look at international guidelines, but our local guidelines. Okay, so a few online resources that we have found to be quite useful. We've gone through the South African Pharmacy Council website, and that's very important. Equally important is SAHPRA, and knowing what information you'll find on the SAHPRA website is critical. So remember that this is very important because it gives us all the information about the registration of medicines, as well as our scheduling, our prescription books, emergency supplies of medicine. So all of that is critically important. So make sure that you have found that. Along with that, it also has our GMP guidelines, and especially more for some of our manufacturing questions, it would be good to know where this information is and what is available on the SAHPRA website. We have sometimes seen that it could be useful to use the MSD manual for professional services. So this is our Merck manual. So have a look at it. EM guidance. Remember that EM guidance is a repository of information. So EM guidance stores a version of the standard treatment guidelines. So it doesn't create new information, but it is a repository for where you can find guidelines, for where you can find professional information. So that's really critical to understand that it doesn't create its own information, but is more this repository of information. So take a look at that and make sure that you can actually see what is it on the website that is quite useful. Okay, then the first thing that you need to think about is how you use these types of resources. Remember that you have got a screen. So I know later on they're going to be talking more about using like the invigilation software, and the exam conditions are quite strict in terms of that you would have to have a second camera as well as the camera on your laptop. So they're going to go through all of those details. So how you access these through your laptop, because you're going to be using your laptop to access all the information, is very important. Okay. So you won't be able to use your cell phone to access this information, but you're going to be using your laptop or your device that you're taking the exam on. So critically important that you can practice, and that you are, when you're going through the exam questions, that you're also using that device that you're going to use in the exam. Okay, so again, here's a list of reference material that is published in the 2025 Intern Tutor Manual for the pre-reg exam. So, for example, again, SAPC website, critically important. Copies of the acts, associated regulations, very important. The pharmacology questions that may come or so the more pharmacology type questions, those would be found in any pharmacology textbook. And that would be to do with maybe side effects or contraindications. You would be able to find that probably in the recommended textbook that you used at university. Standard treatment guidelines, really, this should be highlight, as well as the essential medicines list, and as well as being able to understand that there are 3 levels. So it is pediatric, hospital, and primary healthcare, and what information. The Martindale, Merck manual, as we had said. The Martindale, you will be able to access this through the SAPC website once you log onto the exam browser. SAPRA, in addition to what we have said, the PICS guidelines, as well as don't forget that the PIs, so the professional information, as well as the patient information leaflets, SAPRA has a repository of those documents on their websites so that you can easily access those during the exam. So the SAMF, and remember the SAMF, now the books, I'm not sure if many people are now purchasing the books because there is an app that is available. And just remember our word of caution about things that are printed, especially when it comes to the scheduling and updates. EM guidance, I think that everyone should be familiar on how to use EM guidance. And within EM guidance, you can actually use their drug interaction checker. And the drug interaction checker on EM guidance uses South African branded products. So if you type in a registered product in South Africa, so I could type in Ridac, and it would know that Ridac contains hydrochlorothiazide. And a lot of the drug interaction checkers that are available on other websites aren't familiar with products that are available in South Africa, as well as a drug supply chain management book. Rules and guidelines, so the GPP, guidelines for good wholesaling and distribution practice, as well as the South African guideline to good manufacturing practice. So make sure that this is really the bare minimum that you need to have for the exam. But as I said, within this list, think about how you are going to systematically store the information on your device. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, these are the electronic references. So this is an example of the examination platform. This would be the question. And as you can see here, we've got the question. So we've got the stem of the question, and it's followed by these options, A, B, C, and D. And right over here on the top right-hand corner, what you see is that it actually allows you to open up a references tab. When you open up the references tab, it will allow you to select any of these documents. And what we would suggest is that you would download these. Remember that you have the opportunity to download these documents when you guys are writing the practice exam. So take a bit of time during the practice exam to download these documents so that you have them on hand. I know that there's more information to follow in the last segment of today's workshop about the examination platform, etc. So there is more that's coming your way. Okay, so helpful tips. And when I say it's too soon to panic, even in the exam, it's too soon to panic. Because when we panic, we don't read and we just really get stressed out. And I know that students often know the answer, but they just really stress out in exam conditions. So the first thing is read the question carefully. Okay. Identify the statements that you are sure of and only use your references if you are unsure of statements. So there are often things that you know. So there's certain what we call core concepts. Core concepts are things that you have studied and that we've gone over again and again and again in the BPharm curriculum that you would know offhand. So for these types of questions that you know, you don't need to use your references because you know the answer. It's when you are unsure of the answer that you should then go back and use the reference. Okay. If you are unsure of the answer, don't answer it, because you can only revisit unanswered questions at the end. Okay, so that's very important. So confirm and answer the questions that you are sure of. If you are unsure of a question, you'll be able to revisit it at the end of the exam. So maybe some of us work differently, but maybe you would answer the questions that you are sure of and leave all the questions that you need to look at to the end of the exam. However you decide to work, make sure that you know your strategy ahead of time and that you don't panic. Because sometimes we are really thrown when a question comes our way and we don't know the answer. And then it plays on your mind the whole time, and it actually influences the way that you proceed through the exam. So if you don't know something, don't panic. Skip to the next question, forget about the question that you don't know, and carry on, okay? So that you just carry on and that you build momentum as you are going. The questions, being multiple choice questions, are going to be using certain words. So look out for these words. Majority of questions are going to ask you for a positive answer. So it's going to ask you to identify the true statements or the correct statements. And these keywords are very important. Seldom, but it does happen, we do ask you to identify the negative statement. So these questions would say, which of the following is not applicable to the pharmacy environment? So you'd have to look at that. 3 options would apply and 1 doesn't. So you've got to identify the incorrect answer. There are questions, especially when it's the clinical type of, or maybe the legal questions, where we ask you what is the most appropriate action, which means that the options that follow, all of them should be viable to a certain extent, but one is going to stand out as the most applicable answer. One is going to stand out as the one that is really the best action to take. So we call it the most appropriate, or what might say which of the following is the best actions. So those are quite important, that you're identifying these statements and these keywords, and that you know then how to respond. Remember that there's only one correct answer per question. So you're only allowed to select on one option. Okay, so managing your time, we had 3 minutes for the calculation questions. Here, we have less than 2 minutes per question, because you've got 80 questions and you've got 150 minutes. These are not as challenging in terms of taking time to work them out as the calculation questions are. Some of these, as I said, are going to be core questions and that you'll be able to answer maybe within a few seconds, but some of them are going to take a bit more time. So make sure that you are aware of your time and that you know not to spend too long on a question. So you spending more than 3 minutes on the question, I really suggest that you skip it out and come back at the end. Remember that there is no negative marking, which means that you should not leave anything out. So at the end of the exam, if you don't know the answer to the question, or you're unsure, or you're deliberating between option A and option C, select one of them. Because if you submit without an answer, then there's no chance that you're going to get that question right. Okay. Okay, so there are a couple of areas of concern. So as we have been setting exam questions for quite a few years now, we've seen that these are really the areas that interns need to pay attention to. So the first thing is pharmacovigilance and reporting of adverse drug reactions. So it is the process, it's the responsibility, etc. Pharmacovigilance, remember that although the GPP may refer to pharmacovigilance, the actual guidelines and processes, you'll probably be able to find more of that on the SAHPRA website. So make sure that you're using the correct resource here. Adverse drug reactions are important. Adverse drug reactions for a specific product, I would suggest that your first port of call is really the professional information of that of that API, okay? So a good resource would even be maybe the EM guidance that has a repository of PIs. You can, for adverse drug reactions, use a textbook, okay? So that's not a bad resource, but I would say that if it's asking for specific side effects, for example, of amoxicillin and clavulanic acid, you go to the PI of amoxicillin and clavulanic acid. Okay, so scheduling status. Scheduling status, this is where we see a lot of our recent changes coming about. So scheduling status is something that is often updated quite recently, okay? And a lot of our scheduling is descheduling of certain medicines for specific indications to a Schedule 2 medicine. So make sure that you are aware of these changes. So this really should be exclamation mark, exclamation mark. So have a look at the consolidated schedules. You'd be able to find this on the SAHPRA website, okay? But familiarize yourself with these latest changes, okay? Schedule 6 medicines, we can't emphasize enough. And it seems like Schedule 6 medicines is something that you may have forgotten after you have graduated from university. So how we manage and how we record Schedule 6 medicines. So this is, what are the prescription requirements for a Schedule 6 medicine? How does a pharmacy order Schedule 6 medicines? What is important about the receiving of Schedule 6 medicine? Who in the pharmacy can handle Schedule 6 medicines? And remember, adding to this mix is now pharmacy technicians, because pharmacy technicians have got a scope or are allowed to do certain tasks within Schedule 6 medicines as well. So just make sure that you are familiar with this. What can everyone do when it comes to Schedule 6 medicines? Okay, as well as things like our Schedule 6 register. When do we balance the register? Okay, what happens when we dispose of Schedule 6 medicines? Who has to be present? GMP, as well as the PICS guidelines and the documentation thereof. And I think this is because the questions, remember that the big difference between the questions that we are asking and what you may have done at university is that the questions we are now asking relate directly to practice. We have got examiners, and the examiners come from practice. They're not academics. The academics are the moderators of the questions, but this pre-reg exam is very practice-based. So a lot of the information and questions about about the manufacturing sector come from the practice environment. So familiarize yourself with the guidelines and the documents, etc., etc. Okay. So really take your time to go over these topics, match the references that you have, or at least look for references that fit within these topics, and go through it. Read through the regulations or the information so that you will know in your mind, you would have a better understanding of these processes. In preparing, ask the pharmacist, if you're not handling Schedule 6 medicines on a daily basis, ask the pharmacist that is responsible for Schedule 6 medicines in the pharmacy to show you when next Schedule 6 medicines are ordered. Ask if you can have a look at that. Ask if you can be part of the process so that you can have a look and that you can be involved, because often we learn best when we are involved in the process. So try and have a look at the practical, maybe the practical aspects of these different topics within your work environment. Okay, so this is the part of the workshop where we actually go and have a look at the questions. So we have got 6 questions that we have, and this is going to be on a Microsoft form. So just take a few minutes. I know that they are going to share the link. I'm just checking, do we have the link and could we post it in the chat? So we're going to give you a few minutes to answer these questions. When you are answering these questions, These answers are anonymous. We can't track them back to you, so at the very least, take an educated guess. But I'm going to give you about 8 minutes to answer these questions.
The link has been posted in the Q&A section, so they can be copied there.
Thank you so much, Lisbeth. Okay, so we're starting to get a few responses. Thank you, everyone. It seems like your responses are coming in quickly now. Lisbeth, can I just check how many people do we have on, or how many attendees do we have in today's workshop? Just a rough number.
Currently, we had a booking of 166.
Okay. I'm just going to give a couple of minutes as well, because I know that there sometimes is a delay between between the live version and that on YouTube or Facebook? Okay, so 74. I'm sure there's still a few more people. This will only take a couple of minutes, guys. So if you haven't yet clicked on the link, please would you click on the link and respond to these questions. Okay, 1 more minute. Okay, let's start to have a look at these questions. So it's not so much today about the answer of these questions, but it's more about the process of which reference did you use and how you got to that answer. Okay. Also, what I'd like you to think about is perhaps the domains, and that because the exam is blueprinted. I talked earlier about the blueprinting of the exam. So council has decided, so each exam paper would have the same number of questions per domain. And then within those sections, then they get representatives from community, manufacturing, hospital to set questions in or set relevant questions that would apply to that sector as well. And again, it is constant. So we have, for example, a certain number of questions per domain and then competency standard that are set by community, by hospital, by manufacturing. So it's very much, the papers are very comparable. Okay. Which of the following reference sources would assist you in determining if aspirin is safe to use in pregnancy, in a breastfeeding mother? Okay, so yes, so you are correct. Professional information for aspirin, good pharmacy practice manual. So remember, the GPP is really only going to give us information about how we practice in a pharmacy, what we can do, what we can't do. It's very specific to what actions we can take. Okay. The British Pharmacopedia. So the British Pharmacopedia, I think you use this a lot within your pharmaceutics practicals. It doesn't give very specific information about breastfeeding or pregnancy, etc. It's more about the formulation. Okay, so just have a look at that. I'm glad that none of you answered the Pharmacy Act, because remember, the Pharmacy Act is going to be more about how about the regulation of premises and persons within the pharmacy environment. Okay, so that's quite important. If we go and have a look at where you can find, so this is about what you use to source the information. But if I was going to ask you specific information, for example, is aspirin contraindicated in breastfeeding, you would then be required to go and have a look for that professional information. So in the back of your minds, I want you to think, where are you going to locate that PI? Are you going to use a MIMS desk reference? Are you going to use the SAMF? Are you going to access the PI through the SAHPRA website? Are you going to use EM guidance? So what resource can you use to then access information? So that's critical. Okay, so the next one. Which of the following statements are true regarding methotrexate prescribed for rheumatoid arthritis? So the first option says live virus vaccination should be avoided. Nicotinic acid is required for rescue procedures. C, the medicine is safe to use in pregnancy. And then the last one is the dose is taken as a single dose once a day. Okay, so those that chose option A is correct. But if you see, we've got quite a spread of this. Okay, so first thing is that maybe you can just pop into the chat where you found this information. So in the Q&A, you're not asking a question, but could you just write just one, just what reference source did you use? Okay, so very quickly, those that are online, so interns, please would you tell me, just write, I know that you aren't asking a question, but could you just tell me what reference source you used? EM guidance. Awesome. Okay, so I would have used the same. I would have used EM guidance, but that would not be the only reference source that you could use. But you need more specific information about methotrexate. This is an example where you could have used a pharmacology textbook, because the information would have been for methotrexate, which is quite an old drug. You would have been able to source this information from multiple resources. Okay. Okay, the next one. When you receive a prescription for venlafaxine XL 150 milligrams once a day to be repeated monthly for 5 months, the patient requests that you dispense 75 milligrams instead of the 150 milligram capsules. Which of the following actions is most appropriate for you to take? So the first thing is dispense the 75 milligram capsules as requested. B, dispense 150 milligram capsules as instructed on the prescription. Option C, consult the doctor before dispensing the medication. Or D, advise the patient to take one 150 milligram capsule every second day. Okay, so it seems like the decision was between answer option B and option C. Okay, so remember that we're saying this over here, and the words that I want to highlight here is most appropriate. So to a certain extent, some of these options may not be incorrect. So option D would be absolutely not incorrect. Some pharmacists would have said, if I'm dispensing a lower dose of the same medicine, I should be allowed to do it because I'm not exceeding the dose, but I'm giving them a lower option. So a lot of pharmacists may have chosen to dispense the 75 milligrams. A number of people would have said, well, no, I'm giving it as prescribed. But the risk with giving the medicine as it is prescribed by the doctor would be that the patient is not going to take it. In their minds, they've already said that they don't want that. they want the 75 milligrams. So we've got to consider, is this patient going to comply? And therefore consulting the doctor is the best option to take. So in this event, even if you went and looked up the PI for this medicine, it wouldn't have helped you because the question was not so much on the medicine, but it was more about the legal aspects about prescriptions. Okay, for this, I would have suggested that you would have had a look at the Medicine and Related Substances Act, as well as the general regulations, because that gives us information specific to the different schedules and how we handle those different schedules. Okay. We could also have a look. There would have been some information about the phases of dispensing here, because it would have talked, the GPP would talk to compliance. Okay. But here, this is something that you would have been exposed to in practice. So you've got to think about this. So this is what we would call a problem-solving question. It takes information, it takes the principles of what you've been taught and asks you to really problem solve. So what action are you going to take? This is quite difficult because it doesn't come straight out of a textbook. Okay. So these types of questions you are going to see in the exam. That isn't a straight use your reference source and you'd find the answer, but something that you have to think a little bit more carefully about. The next one. Which of the following is the recommended storage conditions for a tetanus toxoid vaccine in the pharmacy? Okay, so A, in the dispensary refrigerator at a temperature ranging from 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. B, in the freezer compartment of the dispensary refrigerator below -5 degrees Celsius. On the shelf with other vaccines. And D, on the shelf in the pharmacy clinic. Okay, so most of you deliberated between option A and option B. And remember here, the first thing that you would need to know here is that tetanus toxoid vaccine is part of cold chain management. Okay. Here, this is more specific information. So this would be an applied question. It's not quite the same level as the question above. So it's not asking you to really make a decision, but you would need to be able to find this information. The PI for all medicines, so the professional information, there is a section within the PI that talks to storage conditions. Okay. How you are expected to store the medicine. And that's where I would have found this information. If it was more general information about cold chain, you may have been able to refer then to the GPP. But the GPP won't talk specifically about certain vaccines. It may, in general, talk about the polio vaccine or something like that. But I would recommend that for specific information about products, our best resource would be the PI. So yes, 91% of the group today chose the correct resource. Okay, next one. A 7-year-old child presenting with fever and rash at the clinic was diagnosed with measles. Which of the following would be the most appropriate advice to give the mother? The first one, option A, avoid milk and dairy products for at least 1 week. B, isolate the child for at least 14 days. C, administer vitamin C 250 milligrams daily for 2 days. And option D, if the fever persists after the 3rd day of the rash, contact the doctor. Okay, so specifically here, we're now moving away from medicine per se, and only questions relating to the administration or the dispensing of medicine, and we're looking towards more clinical information. Okay. So maybe you could just drop again, just in the Q&A section, if you could just tell me which resource did you use? Where did you find this answer? Okay, so in the Q&A, just type where you found this answer. We're going to give you 1 minute. Where did you find information about measles? Standard treatment guidelines, pediatric. Yep. Okay. So yes, that's where you could find it. Remember that I wanted to just show you, and I just want to show you on EM guidance over here. EM guidance, as I said, is a repository. So if I'm typing in measles, okay, I type it in. What is wrong? Oh, there we go. Sorry, I spelled it incorrectly. Okay, if I have a look at measles over here, these areas here, guys, are quite important because these are different sections. So I've got measles, ICD-10 code devices, guidelines, etc. So make sure that if you want to restrict or reduce your search, you could look at specific tabs. Okay. So what I would suggest here is that, remember I said that these are guidelines. It is a repository. So this guideline over here, measles, this is the National Department of Health. This is hospital level pediatric. This is where the guidelines are. Okay. If I have a look over here, this is measles, but it's not from the South African government. The next one is from Paarl Hospital in the Western Cape. Here I have again measles, and this is primary health care. So this question over here, the position is that you are in the community pharmacy and that you are then providing advice. So you don't have a patient that is in hospital. You now have a patient that is in the community pharmacy, and you're trying to tell the mom maybe about the signs and symptoms or when to refer the patient, etc. So it's important that you find the right guidelines. So that's what I wanted to highlight. And then you would be able to have a look at the type of information that is there. This is great for definitions. It's great because it gives us a description, okay? It then talks about the general measures, okay? And then it gives us medicine options. So I would like that if you haven't yet familiarized yourself with standard treatment guidelines, that you spend a bit of time looking at the guidelines that are around. Okay, so let's switch back. Over here, avoid milk and dairy products. No. Okay. Isolate the child for at least 14 days. Okay. There is referral that does, referral does happen. And remember that the big risk that we have with children that have measles is that there is a possibility that that they get very, very sick and land up in hospital. And as we have heard, especially within the United States, there have been a couple of deaths associated with measles. So this is a good question. It tests something that is very relevant, okay? But we also know that there was also a lot of controversy around the measles vaccine. So think about this question and the type of information that it provides. Go back to the standard treatment guidelines as your resource here. Okay, the next one. What is the minimum period that a prescription record must be kept in the pharmacy before it is discarded? Okay, so here we've got the question over here talks to the minimum period. So what is the minimum period? It doesn't say what is the maximum period. So Pharmacy Council creates minimum standards. So this is, you can keep records for much longer, but you can't keep records for less than 5 years. So a good majority of the group chose 5 years. That 10 years would not be incorrect if we didn't say so. So if the question said, what is the period that a prescription record could be kept, not must be kept, you could have said 10 years, because then it's just talking about it in general. But if I'm putting certain provisos on it, I'm talking about the minimum period and I'm talking about must. So must is that there's some legal document that is supporting this question, okay? And this is 5 years. Remember that This is something that you would have learned at university. You know this. You don't have to look this up, okay? So you know this question. If you're confident about the answer it and go on, so that when it comes to the more complex questions, perhaps you are not in that sector and it's going to take you a little bit longer to look up the answer. Save your time for those questions. Okay, so those were our examples and our questions. I think this now takes us to the Q&A session about the general questions. So if you have any questions, I think Natalie will read them out for us, or Lisbeth, or are we going to wait until the end, Lisbeth?
Diane, we only have one that is relevant to the section. It's regarding question 3. The question reads, with regards to question 3, is it then fair that there would be only one correct answer as everyone's personal experience differs?
Okay, so with this being the most appropriate answer, this says to us, so it's not that, it's that the other options are viable, not that the other options are correct. There is only, so the best option, the best action for a pharmacist to take is to consult the doctor. Okay, so it's not that your experience, remember as pharmacists, and we need to take the best action. Okay, so yes, you could dispense 150 milligram capsules, but when posed with 2 options to say refer the patient or consult the doctor before dispensing, that is the best option. Okay. Dispensing 150 milligram capsules would not be in the best interest of the patient because we know about compliance. Okay. So yes, there is a best answer here, and that's the one that you need to choose. Okay, so that the other ones are viable, but they shouldn't be what we are going to do.
Thank you, Diane. The next question is, what is the correct answer for question 5?
Oh, question 5, what did we get to? Okay, so I think, yes, I'd go with the majority. The majority isolate the child for at least 14 days.
All right, and then the next one is regarding Google, but I think we can answer it later.
Okay. Remember, I just want to give a note about using other sources, guys. When we start, it's a slippery slope if we are using search engines to start to search for answers for questions, because that's not really going to give us a relevant and current answer. These questions have all been set not using Google. Okay, so we don't want you to use Google. We want you to use an appropriate resource. And we used these questions and we phrase these questions as representative questions of what you will come across in practice. So I think that as a pharmacist in everyday practice, you need to find a resource that you can depend on. And pharmacists in practice shouldn't be Googling to try and find side effects or contraindications. They should find a reliable resource to use to get to those answers. So in preparing for this, we're also trying to teach you about the practice environment and how you need to use these resources on a regular basis, not only for the exam, but in your everyday practice. Thanks, Lisbeth. I think my section is done.
Thank you very much. All right, let us then continue. If there are any other further questions that can come, please do continue including them in the chat, and we will solve them later as we go on. Now that we are done preparing for the calculation, which is day 1, we prepare for the general day 2. Let's now look at the other nitty-gritties about the exam. So council hosts 3 exam opportunities for interns every year. The first one has already gone, that was in March. And remember what we said, each exam comes with its own practice session. The practice session setup is exactly the same as the exam. The rules and requirements are the same, except for the actual minimum requirements for entering into the exam, which includes your CPDs and your progress reports and all of that. So the next upcoming practice exam is on the 3rd of June. It should be a Tuesday. On the day of the practice exam, you write both sections with a 30-minute break in between. However, when it's the actual exam, the 2 sections are written on separate days, usually a Tuesday and a Wednesday. The next one will be on the 5th and 6th of August. Then we do the October one with its practice in September. So the practice exam is an absolute requirement for you to gain entry into the actual exam, unless you have written a previous practice exam or an actual exam. But then with the more practice you gain, the more it will be easier for you to write the actual exam. So we encourage as many practice exams as you can afford, right? Someone asked about the eligibility into the exam with the 6 months versus the 9 months. So if you are on the 6th month of the exam, on the day, the 6th month of your internship on the day of the exam. So if we are saying that the next upcoming exam is in August, that means that by the 4th or the 5th or the 6th of August, you must have completely completed 5 months of internship. You must be on the 6th month of internship on that day. So these are usually people that registered this year in Jan and somewhere before mid-Feb. They would be on above their 5th month or their 6th month of internship, but before they are finishing 8 months or 9 months, right? So if you are on that period, right, you must then have submitted 6 CPD or 6 portfolio of evidence, entries, and you must be competent in 3 of them. So all 6 must have already been submitted and verified by your tutor, but then you must be competent in 3 of them. That means that you also then practice the exam on the 3rd of June before then. So with regards to the practicing of the exam, these requirements don't really apply. They only apply for the actual exam. So that means that you don't have to worry about them for June, but you need to start submitting now because you need to have met them before August. Then your tutor must have submitted 3 progress reports, so that means that the 12 weeks and the 24 weeks must already be submitted. If you are on your 9th month of internship, these are people usually before somewhere mid-December. That means that from the time of registering as an intern to the date of the exam, you would have been an intern for over 8 months. You would be on the 9th month of internship on the day of the exam. For you, you must have submitted and been found competent in all of your portfolio of evidence entries, and you must have done the practice. You must have done the practice exam. This would also mean that you could have practiced in Jan or actually written the exam in March. And then your tutor must have submitted 4 progress reports, right? So these entrance requirements are still the same. They haven't changed for the 2025 year. This here shows you the deadlines that you need to take into account as far as the CPDs are concerned. So we have a date that you submit, and the date that the tutor verifies, and the date that the CPD are released. So now that means that on our side, your final submission date, if you have to have any back and forth between you and your tutor, all of that must happen before this deadline, so that you give your tutor enough time to read and go through it and then verify before they are then submitted to us for final verification, and then you submit. So ensure that you give yourself enough time so that you are able to book for the exam and you are able to access entry, because depending on how far along you are into the internship, these requirements are very real. So for the gang that is going to be writing on the 5th or 6th of August, we prefer that you have your last CPD submitted before the 2nd of June, right? So that your tutor verifies on the 4th, and then you will have your results released by the 25th of June. This is so that you do not have to pay a late booking fee, because if you submit on the 1st of July, right, and they're only released on the 22nd, on the 21st of July, you might be then liable for a late booking fee. We will look into the dates for the booking fee later on, but then if you know that you will be on the 6th month in August or somewhere before the 9th month, then you need to make sure that you have submitted all six CPDs by this date. And then also, even if you are on the 9th month, so that they are released before here, because here then you might have to book into the exam a bit later, which will then make you pay a late booking fee. So you need to make sure that you submit all your exams prior to that. So when you look at the deadlines for this, we've already gone through as to how you need to submit, because with also your CPDs, the more you submit, right, and they are not successful, you need to know that if you are now submitting your CPD the 10th time, you will then be charged a fee of 319 for every other submission beyond that. So you need to make sure that you give yourself enough time to work on the CPD, have enough discussion with your tutor so that you correct everything before the verification and submission, so that you don't get a lot of back and forth between yourself and the assessors with regards to the CPD submission. Now, our bookings will open 6 weeks before the exam, right? So if now we open 6 weeks before the exam, we will send you communication via email and via SMS to say that we have opened bookings. If you book within the first 2 weeks of the bookings being opened, which is a month before the day of the exam, if you are writing for the first time or the second time, there will not be a fee. However, if you book within 4 weeks before the exam, from that to 2 weeks before the exam, there will be a late booking fee, because the exam bookings are only open for 2 weeks, 6 weeks before the exam. And then at 4 weeks before the exam, the booking closed. But then if you still need to book from that point forward, usually because of CPDs that were submitted late, then that means that between that 4 weeks and the 2 weeks, you will then be eligible for paying for the late booking fee. 2 weeks before the exam or 14 days before the exam, we do not allow any bookings, because now we have closed the booking completely and we are making arrangements to make sure that the day of the exam is as smooth as possible. We do, however, request that you make sure that you go into your platform, you make sure that we have the correct cell phone number for ease of communication and email address, and the latest profile picture, which is a clear picture, non-edited. This is also for verification prior the exam and also during the exam. So the profile picture must make sure that it is a color picture, it is within the last 6 months, and it's just the head and shoulder. I know you have nice, beautiful graduation pictures that you would like for us to have. However, those ones become very difficult to verify during the exam. And I know that we have nice apps that take beautiful pictures, but then also those ones do amend your face a little bit, and it makes it very difficult for us to also verify. So a clear, nice color picture from the last 6 months with as minimal alterations in the face as possible, so that during the exam we are able to confirm that the person who booked for the exam, the person that we are seeing through the proctor, is the actual person that we have on our records. So like we said, you log into your platform, right? You go into your personal profile and then you update the picture. If you just choose file, it will allow you to go and choose. You can do this via your cell phone if your pictures are on your phone, or you can choose a picture, then transfer it to your laptop and then update. But then you should be able to update this via your cell phone as well. Right, now that your details are correct, that is your cell phone and your email address and your picture, you then log in to the secure site. By logging in, I mean you go into the South African Pharmacy Council website, registered persons, pharmacist interns, then you click log in, right? Then when you log in there, you will be able to go to the pre-registration tab under the dashboard. So when you're on your dashboard, you should be able to see the pre-registration examination. This is the only way for you to book, just like you logged in now to be able to book for this workshop. Then you will book for your examination. When you book for your examination, you will see that it will give you the specific dates for the two sections, right? So calculations is usually first, then followed by general, but then we're doing the practice, both of them will be on the same day. And then you will be prompted here to then also select the venue, your chosen venue for the exam. These two venues can be different if need be, but we prefer that you keep them the same so that you maintain the conditions around your exam the same. So if for whatever reason you are now on the third attempt for the exam, or you are writing a special exam, then you need to know that there will be a specific fee for that. But if you're writing for the first time or the second time and it's on the proper timeline, there will not be a fee for that. As far as the venues are concerned, you can choose to book at home where you live, right? You can choose to book at home, at work where you are practicing. You can choose to come to Pretoria in the SAPC offices, and you can choose to write in a library or your university or wherever that you feel you'll be comfortable. However, when you are booking, you need to make sure that you have considered the devices that you will need. You have considered how you will communicate with the SAPC, and you have also considered what you will need during the actual exam, right? So when you are booking, you need to make sure that the place that you are booking is a place that is suitably quiet for you to work. So if you are comfortable at home, but there are toddlers and all of those, it might not be user-friendly. If you're comfortable at home, but you know that on Tuesdays they're cutting grass, it might not be the best place because it needs to be quiet, right? And you must have enough working space. So if you also want to write from work, but you are 5 interns and you might have to share space, that might not be conducive either. During the exam, like Dan has been saying, do not panic. Keep as calm as possible. You will have access to myself, to all the pre-reg department and your invigilators that are going to be holding your hand throughout the process, and I will show you how you can easily communicate with us. Like the facilitators have already said, make sure that you have your references ready at hand. If you want to use any of the references from the SAPC website, download them beforehand, right? We have already addressed using Google. You can't use Google. You can use Chrome as a browser to get to a reference, right? However, that is time that you don't have, especially for the general section wherein you have less than 2 minutes per question. Therefore, have your references ready. Use your references from now until then so that you can bookmark where what is. That will save you a lot of time, right? For the calculation section, make sure that you have a calculator and a notepad. You might also need them for the general section, but make sure that whatever you are going to need, you bring it into the room that you will be writing your exam. That be home, SAPC offices, work, or the library. So the actual devices for the exam, you need 2 devices. It's either going to be a laptop or a desktop plus a cell phone, right? So 2. Minimum 2. That means that you need to make sure that you have a laptop. And with regards to the laptop or desktop, it must be camera compatible. It must have a camera or what is this thing? It must be camera compatible. So you must be able to take a picture from the laptop itself or from the desktop itself. And then you need to have a cell phone that also has a camera and can do a QR code scanner, because we need to see you from the camera on the desktop and the laptop, and from the camera on your cell phone. And to link these two, you would need to scan a QR code from your laptop via your cell phone. So 2 devices, both camera compatible, and the cell phone must have a QR code scanner. On the day, you would need a minimum of 3 gigabytes, right? So this you need to check already now as to where you have your best network, which network provider provides you with the best network and speed, the weather, and then make sure that on that day you have a minimum 3 gig of that best provider. Even if you might prefer your specific Wi-Fi, but if you know that it is slow, please try and make plans for that particular day. When it comes to the browsers, we all have favorite browsers that we like to use because the search engine is easier or whatever the story may be. But for the sake of this specific exam, please make sure that you have all three browsers. That is Google Chrome, Firefox, and Microsoft Edge. With the three browsers, you will choose whichever you are familiar with for the sake of the exam, but just in case, have all three of them because these three have been proven to have the best compatibility with the exam platform and the proctoring platform. So you do not want to have browser issues, and to avoid that, get Google Chrome, Firefox, and Microsoft Edge. Now we were going to look into the steps that you take into logging into the exam. When it comes to this, we will do it twice, and the reason for doing it twice is I need you to note it step by step. As much as we are going to have a practice exam, it would help that you have this already in mind. So you will log into the SAPC website, right? And then you will enter your one-time PIN and you will read the examination comments, and then the exam ends. Remember at the beginning I said the exams are split into 2 days, and the facilitator also confirmed that with the first day, which is the calculation section, the exam is 2 hours. It being 2 hours, that means that the exam will start at 9 and finish or end at 11. However, we recommend that between 8 and 9 you are logging in, and then you just wait to click start the exam, because I promise you, if you start trying to log into the exam at 9, then you are into the platform at 9:30. Now it's 11 and you are not done. We will not be able to extend the time for you. Same thing with day 2, between 8 and 9, make sure that you are logging in, you are entering your one-time password, you're ensuring that your cell phone is completed, you complete the declaration, and you wait. At 9, you click start exam, you write your exam. At 11:30, which is 2.5 hours for the general section, you then complete the exam, do the survey, and you carry on with your day, right? So let's go through the steps step by step. The first day. So this is now around 8, right? 8:15, but definitely minimum 30 minutes before 9, right? You will go to the South African Pharmacy Council website. You will click on registered persons, then you click to pharmacist interns, then you go to pre-registrations, then you go into where it says log in. It will prompt you to say click here for the exam of this date, right? You will put then your PIN number, the same PIN number that you are using right now whenever you need to log in to submit your CPDs. You will put in your ID, you will put in your password. If you do not know your password, make sure that you request it early and have it written down somewhere, right? After that, the screen will look like this, wherein you will now be waiting for an OTP. The countdown will be more or less 10 minutes. However, you should receive your password or your OTP within 2 minutes. This OTP is sent into both your cell phone number as an SMS and your email, which is also why it's important for you to make sure that you have your details updated with us. Then from then on, you will log into the Proctor Edge, which is how we invigilate you during the exam. You will then do your declaration. From then on, you will wait here to click start the exam, right? You can wait here for as long as you want. It will not idle out. Yeah? And then from then on at 9 o'clock, you click start the exam. Your questions are going to appear. You will have the question number, a timer, the question here with your 4 multiple choice options. After you're done, and you have submitted all 40 questions on day 1 or all 80 questions on day 2, you will then click submit the examination. If it's on day 1, there will not be a survey, but then on day 2, because now you are done with the entire exam, you will get a survey for you to then complete and share your experience as far as the exam is concerned. As I've already said, make sure that when it comes to your browsers, you have all 3 of them downloaded. You can even download them as we speak, but make sure that you have Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. These ones have been proven to have compatibility with the platform. So they are going to give you the less hassles as compared to the other ones, right? So you go to the South African Pharmacy Council website, registered persons, pharmacist intern, pre-registration. You can also make sure that you have maybe this written down or this slide available wherever you go. So it's pharmacist intern, pre-registration, and then it will say something on the lines of click here to access the pre-registration examination. If you go to the website right now, if you follow the steps, which is you go to any browser, being Google Chrome, and then you click on registered persons, pharmacist intern, pre-registration examination. Right now it should read, please click here to access pre-registration practice exam 03 June 2025, because it has already been updated to keep up with the time for the next exam. Also on this tab, when you go further down, you will find all the other information regarding to the exam, the requirements that we spoke about right now with regards to whether you're on the 6th month or the 9th month of internship, the practice papers to help you prepare, the blueprint that Dr. Diane was referring to. All of it will be also on this page if you click there and you go a bit further down. After you have clicked on click here to access the exam, it will automatically land you onto this page. That is where you will now put in your PIN number. You will then put in your ID. You will then put in your password. Then you press enter. After pressing enter, this screen is going to appear, right? While this is appearing, you can quickly go to your cell phone for your SMS or your email, right? Usually the countdown, we allow it for 10 minutes, but like I said, this usually comes in very fast. So within 2 minutes, you should have it. Then you put in your OTP. After you have put in your OTP, you will then press continue. Again, make sure that we have the correct accessible cell phone number, and if you are those people that have a different number for WhatsApp and a different number for calls and SMSs, the OTP will be sent as an SMS. So please make sure that we have the number that will allow you to access SMSs from us. Then after that, once you have now pressed continue, the system will auto do a system check, right? So with the system check, it will first do a browser check, hence the 3 browsers that we are recommended. It will then do a webcam check. With the webcam check, it will want access to the camera from your laptop or your desktop. Then it will do a microphone check. That means that you need to allow us access to your microphone. If any of these things are not permitted, it will not go from orange to green, but rather from orange to red until you go and you give us permission on the day of the exam to access this, right? So with the microphone check, this means that also during the exam, we are able to hear your surrounding, which is why I said make sure that wherever you are writing is a quiet place. A network check, it will also check the speed of your network, whether it's compatible for the exam. Again, even if you have a preferred way of accessing your network, just make sure it is fast enough for that day. Screen check, this will ask you to then also use one screen. Other people like having 2 screens for screen sharing, but then you will only be allowed to use one monitor because we need you to share what you are doing. So if you have your resources in soft copy or electronic, when you move from the exam platform to your resources, we need to be able to see that. Essentially what I'm saying is we need to be able to see everything that you are doing on the laptop or the desktop on the day of the exam. We need to be able to see you on the day of the exam. We need to be able to hear you on the day of the exam. So with the screen check, it will ask you to share your screen. If you do not share your screen, it will not allow you to continue. Only once you have done the screen check, and then another one last web compatibility check, right? So this link is also available in your intern tutor manual. You can follow it and do this check any day prior to the exam. You can even do it now. With this link, it just allows you to do this compatibility test. So say you have 3 devices and you're not sure which one to use. You can follow this link to test all 3 of them and just see which one gives you all green ticks, and then you know that that is the one that you can trust on the day of the exam. So if all is well, right? All of these must be green. Whichever turns red, it will tell you what the problem is. Get to it, get it sorted, or get someone to assist in resolving that. My advice, follow this link and do the system check as soon as you can so that you can make changes or purchases or whatever may be required for you before the exam. Once everything has turned green here, this button, the next button will also turn green. If any of these are red or still yellow, this or still orange, this will not turn green. It will only remain gray, which means you will not be able to proceed. Once that has turned green and you've pressed next, it will auto populate your details here. It then becomes your responsibility to check and see that the details displayed are correct. Then it will ask you to take a picture. When it asks you to take a picture, now, I've already spoken about the beautiful picture that we take elsewhere, but here it must be as authentic as possible. So your face must be within the circle, not too close, not too far, right? The lighting must be perfect, meaning that you mustn't have direct light above your head. It mustn't be blurred in any ways. You might be required to close your curtains or your blinds, but you need to make sure that the lighting is perfect because it's an authentication. So it needs to be able to pick up your facial features and match them with what we have. Once you click take photo and it is happy with the photo, it will allow you to go next. If you take the photo and it's not happy with the photo, it will ask you to retry, right? And then if it's happy with the photo, you will click next. After having clicked next, it will now ask you to connect your mobile camera. So all along, you've been doing everything on your desktop or your laptop, and now it's time to connect your camera, which is why the QR code scanner from your cell phone comes in, because now you will scan this QR code, and then while it's standing like this on your desktop, on your cell phone, it will have this screen popping up with the play. The instructions for this will be that you click play, and then you record a 1-minute video of your surrounding. What this means is you click play, right? You click record, and then you do a 360 turn of your environment. So from where you are sitting, this is a recording of how your table is looking, and then you do a 360 turn for us to have a record of your setup that you had prior to the commencement of the exam, right? After this, on the cell phone, it will ask you to save this video. Once the video has been saved and accepted by the proctor system, only then will it allow you to move to next. If the video is not accepted, you will not be able to move to next. Once the video is accepted, then you will move to next, and then you will be able to read the declaration. So this is how the declaration will look on the day, but because this is blurred, this is how they are. So you are basically saying or giving an oath or swearing that on the day of the exam, you are in an area that is suitable for the exam with minimal distraction, right? You agree that you're not sitting next to or in close proximity to any other candidate during the exam. You agree that you will not receive any form of assistance from anyone during the exam. You will not communicate with any other registered person during the exam, your tutor, your supervisor, your PA, no one. You also agree that you will only be using reference material that is permitted for the exam. You will not access any other reference material, meaning that you are saying that you will not be using Google to get any answer. You will not be giving any assistance to any other person writing the exam. That means that during the exam, you will not be participating in any intern WhatsApp group and sharing information. You will not share or retain any content of the exam, and that you will inform us if you notice anyone contravening in any of the above. Then after that, you will land in a page that looks like this, right? Where it says start the exam. Please make sure that you are in this page before 9 o'clock hits. However, when you are here, you do not click the button start the exam until it is 9 o'clock on the dot, right? If for whatever reason you click the start button, it will state that the examination has not started. If you sit on it for long enough, if you are on this page for long enough and it's already 9 or a minute past 9 and you haven't clicked start the exam, then it will say to you, the exam has started. So it will prompt you that you can now start the exam. Do not worry about trying to click it at 1:45 just in case it has started, because you will keep on getting this error until the exam has been started. Once you have now written the exam and you are now submitting, you will have to declare again that you are confirming that you have completed the exam without any assistance, right? And because if you don't, then the SAPC can take disciplinary actions via our professional conduct. And you also declare that you will not share any contents from that exam with anyone, either via printed copies or electronically or verbal or any means whatsoever, right? And then if for some odd reason on the day of the exam you are not in the country, right? You are somewhere where the time zone is not the same as South Africa, just make sure that you are on the correct time zone as us so that you are able to write the exam, because if you are not on the correct time zone, it will not allow you to write. Also, if your computer did some updates and the time is not correct, the time and date are not correct, it will not allow you to write. It is a timed exam. It opens at 9, closes at 11, so your computer time must be the same as that. Otherwise, it will say to you, please adjust your date and time so that it matches the 3rd of June 2025, 9 o'clock for you to be able to write. And then if for some odd reason you get these live proctoring not connected, this could also happen if you keep on clicking that start button multiple times, right? Because then you're confusing the system, since you were told that you need to wait until 9. Then you might have to be required to stop everything that you're doing, close all browsers, delete the history and the cache, then come back and try to log in again. So it is very important that you get to the start start the exam button. You sit there and you don't do anything until it is 9 o'clock, then you're able to start the exam. During the examination, your invigilators are monitoring you, right? They are monitoring you via the screen, but trust you me, they are monitoring you. So that means that whenever, remember I said that you must share your microphone. That means that we are able to hear your background noise and we are able to detect whether this is just someone cutting the lawn outside or are you having a conversation. Then we are able to zoom in and listen to the conversation that you are having. Are you having someone assisting you? So whenever we are in, you will also be able to see that it's giving you the notification to say that there is a violation, which is a conversation or noise in the background. When you see this also, then you need to make sure that you stop your conversation before it is too late. If also you have electronic references and you are switching screens, or your screens from the tab that you are writing the exam to a reference tab, it will also notify you and it will notify us as well. Then we are able to then go and see, are you on Google typing out what is methotrexate, or are you then accessing a reference material, right? If for whatever reason your cell phone is no longer connected for the second screen for us to see you, it will also say your cell phone or your mobile camera is not connected. Then you will also be asked to do so. And then if also you are using a second screen, wherein now we are not able to see, or because you can't share two screens, right? It will also say that there's a second display is used. And then also if you are muting your mic so that we're not able to hear your background noise or your conversation, it will say that your microphone has been muted, because other people, once they've bypassed the checks, then they go and they mute. Then it will tell us that, but now that the person has bypassed the checks, they've muted. Then we will ask you to please reopen your mics and all of that. And then when you are writing the exam, it's one question at a time, right? Your questions are randomized. It is a timed exam, like I've already spoken. You cannot revisit a question that you have answered. So if you are not sure, you are more than welcome to skip the question. But if you answer it and you go to the next question, that question will not appear again. Only unanswered questions will reappear at the end. So this is how it looks. This would be how your question one will look like. If you click on references, we have a few references that we have already loaded into the platform that you can access on the day. But then again, this would only be useful if it's references that you have used before. If you're seeing them for the first time, it could be tricky. But then also for you to know this list, it is there in your intern tutor manual. So you'd have your question here, your options here, and then you can either click an option, press next, or you can press next without clicking an option. If you click an option, that question is automatically answered and saved, right? That means you can't revisit. But then if you click next without answering any of the questions, that question is now available. You can click here to chat with your invigilator. If you click here, you'll be able to send a message, and then one of your invigilators will be able to respond to you on that spot. Once this conversation is started, a bar will open here, which will be your chat with your invigilator. You can close it once you are done with them. So your answers are saved as you progress, right? This is very important because should anything happen, load shedding or whatever, you need to know that whatever you have clicked and selected an answer for has already been saved, and it's already saved and submitted, right? So as you are moving along, the platform is also taking a recording of what you are doing on the screen, your pictures and everything else, and you will not be able to revisit answered questions. Only the unanswered questions will appear again towards the end of the exam, right? Now, these are randomized, frequently asked questions, just so that maybe if something was not covered within the exam, within the presentation, we can try and answer them here. When will you be able to get your results, right? Or are you able to view your exam paper, and can your exam paper be remarked? And the answer is usually we release the results after they have been marked and moderated and approved by the register. This usually takes on about 6 to 8 weeks. However, you will be notified when the results are ready. This also, you view them online. You log in again, and then instead of clicking on examination bookings, you will now be clicking on examination results for you to then view your examination results. You are more than welcome to appeal the results. You only have to do this within 30 days of the results are released. You, however, do not get the opportunity for the paper to be remarked. This is because there are a lot of thorough checks that are done before the results are released. Like I said already, when you're writing the exam, it is auto submitted. After it is marked, the paper before you write the exam is moderated. After that, it is moderated. Then it goes for statistical analysis. So we are very confident with the steps and the processes that go into the exam within that 8-week period for verification that the mark that you have received is the correct one. However, we do offer you an opportunity to come into the SAPC offices, wherein you will sit with either myself or my boss or any other manager, and you will go through your paper. By going through your paper, you will then look at the memo, basically the question and the answers, and you will then be given an opportunity to understand how we got to those answers and the references used, but then there will not be any remarking whatsoever. And then what happens if you are unsuccessful at the examination? You can rewrite at the next exam opportunity. So if you're unsuccessful now in August, you are more than welcome to write again in October. If you fail one of the sections but pass the other, you have to write both sections. Remember, these are both sections of one paper, so you cannot pass half the paper and write. So if you fail one section and pass the other, you will have to write both sections of the paper. And also that means that if you were writing in October, you were in your 6th month, but then now you are writing if you're writing in August in your 6th month, when you rewrite in October, you are now in your 9th month. That means that the requirements for the exam are now different, and you need to meet the criteria as per the term that you are writing, this being the portfolio of evidence and the progress reports. How will your invigilator contact you? Like we said, they will either send you text via your phone, if you provided you have given us the correct number. Some invigilators will also call you if they are seeing that it's almost 9 and you haven't logged into the exam to find out what the problem is, right? And then they are also able to chat to you via the chat function within the Proctor system if you have already logged into the system and there's something wrong that they are seeing while you are writing the exam, or if you have any question with maybe a reference you're not sure, or if you want to ask if your questions have been submitted or any of those things. Where can you get help during the exam? Like I said, the chat function, you can use that, or you can save whatever number that your invigilator is going to contact you with before the beginning of the exam. Also, please have this WhatsApp number ready, because with this WhatsApp number, you will be chatting to the lead invigilator of the day. That means that you can also send your queries via this WhatsApp number on the day of the invigilation. But then when it comes to this number, please know that it's the one number for all the interns, so it might take a bit of time for you to get a response, which is why we prefer you speak to your invigilators, but then a response would also be given to you via this number. Where should you sit for the exam? Wherever you have booked, right? So wherever you have booked, you will sit there for the exam. Make sure that you have sufficient lighting, right? Sometimes this might mean that you close your curtains or your blinds and that you're not sitting directly facing light. This might give you a problem when you need to take a picture, right? So remember, I said you need to test your system, also test your lighting beforehand by trying to take a selfie of yourself and see how it appears. Is it blurred? Is it too bright? Can you see all your facial features on that picture, right? And then make sure that all your cameras, both from the device that you're using, is working. That is the webcam from your laptop or desktop, and also your camera from your cell phone. Please dress appropriately. Even if you are writing from home, whatever you're doing on that day is recorded and becomes permanent record of you in the Pharmacy Council. So that means that if you're going to write your exam in pajamas, that is the record that we have of you, right? So just please dress appropriately and cover up so that, we're not having that issue where now your invigilator is asking you to please go dressed appropriately, because that will also be now charging or eating at your time, right? If they cannot see you, whether that is because you've closed the webcam or you've closed the camera on your cell phone, they will ask you to please connect those. And please try and make sure that when you see the violation on your side, you address it, because you also do not want to be spending time communicating with us on things that you can fix easily. And if you choose to ignore the invigilator, you can be kicked out of the exam. So because you are seeing the violation, they are seeing the violation, they contact you, you ignore them, we will kick you out of the exam. If we kick you out of the exam and you try to get back in, that time will not be reimbursed to you. What if you experience load shedding or electricity cuts? Again, as Deanne has said, you keep calm, right? But before that, make sure that you've checked your load shedding schedule. I know that we're not doing a lot of load shedding now, but there are some areas with load reductions. So if you've already noted that in your area there's load reduction, plan accordingly, right? Make sure that your laptop is fully charged, that you have alternative Wi-Fi connection, and that you make sure that you have an area that you can easily relocate to. But unfortunately, this cannot be your car, right? Because your car, the parameters there are going to be very difficult to control. But if you know that you are in an area that could possibly have disturbances, then have a plan B area ready. Because like I said, time is of the essence and you will not be granted extra time, right? However, if ever you had booked for work, and then on the day they're doing renovations and you need to change to home, just notify us either via that WhatsApp number or send us an email to say that I had booked for this, but now something is happening and I need to quickly change locations. And what if now you are writing the exam and your invigilator notifies you that your cell phone is not connected? So where you will be seeing your full question, right? On the side here, there should be on the left-hand corner, there should be your picture appearing here. If you click on it, you'll also be able to access a calculator, then the QR code, the chat function if you need to be, and how to return back. So if you click on the QR code, you will be able to rescan your cell phone and get back to your invigilator being able to see your face. This calculator is in case you were also unable to bring in a calculator that you are familiar with, you can use this one, but then it's a very standardized question just for multiplication, additions, and those kind of things, not an advanced type of calculator. So if you want a specific calculator with formulas and everything, this will not be your calculator. What should you do if you're disconnected and log back in and it says that the page was opened elsewhere? That means that the session itself was not closed, and what you then need to do is close all browsers, right, and then try log back into the exam. When you close all browsers, you are not closing the tab. The difference between closing an opened tab and closing all browsers, you need to close the entire browser, right, refresh, clear your history and your cache, and log back in. The next few slides are basically on how to clear your cache or troubleshoot within the 3 different browsers that we have used, right? So if you are doing it on Chrome, these slides will be made available on the website, so you can go through them just so that you are familiar with the 3 different browsers, so that on the day, should you need to clear your cache or your browsing history on Chrome, or you need to write the exam in incognito mode because you're unable to clear any of the caches, this is what you would do. If you are doing it on Firefox, this is how you would go about it. But if we say that if you are getting that error where it says Proctor not connected or a previous session is still open, make sure that you clear your history or your cache. It will make your life much more easier. So you can do this for Chrome, Edge, and Firefox, right? And then what should I do if I need to change the venue? Please, if you know this beforehand, let us know, especially if you are going to come to the SAPC offices, because we need to prepare the laptop for you. So send us an email here at pre-reg exam workshops at sapc.za.org so that we are able to then prepare for you. Also, if you are just changing maybe from here to home or work, but whatever you're doing, please let us know so that we are well prepared for you. And then as far as your internship is concerned, the examination is just one part of it. You still have your portfolio of evidence, which we have already gone through with the different dates of submission, and those dates are very crucial. You cannot be coming and asking that you had an error, because now you might find that the assessor has already allocated and they might not have time to assess your CPD because it was submitted late. So please make sure that you are on par as far as the portfolio of evidence is concerned, and then you qualify to write the exam, pass the exam. Your tutor is submitting your progress reports as they are due. That is at 12 weeks, 24 weeks, 36 weeks, 45 weeks, right? So they must submit your progress reports, and then you are an intern for a minimum 365 days, right? So please make sure that you also test your proctor via that link and see that your device is compatible way prior than the exam, so that you're able to make whatever changes that you might need to make, right? And then we know that sometimes the internship environment might not be conducive for whatever reason. However, it's 1 year of practical training. And once you're done with that year, you are really almost free to do as you please. And with the challenges that we're currently facing as far as internship posts are concerned, please make sure that whatever can be resolved is resolved. You complete your internship year, you meet all the requirements, and you're released for community service. If they are not easy to resolve within your immediate environment, you're more than welcome to then, involve the pharmacy manager, the HR, but please try your level best to make sure that you are not hopping or job hopping from one internship to another, because we have other interns that need the post, and we would like for you to complete your internship in 365 days so that you are a community service pharmacist and a free pharmacist within another 12 months of that, right? And please make sure that you are at best behavior and you're not giving your tutors a hard time. Another question that we get a lot is whether you are allowed to work to locum or not, and the simplest answer to that is that you can. However, you need to understand in what capacity. So when you are in pharmacy A, right, where you are registered as an intern with your tutor being there, you are practicing the scope of a pharmacist, right? So that means that there you are doing everything that the pharmacist does under their supervision. However, if you go to locum for whatever reason, money, or you have extra time or whatever, in that pharmacy, which is pharmacy B, where you are locuming, you cannot access the scope of a pharmacist, because that is not where you are approved to train to be a pharmacist. There you are only accessing the scope of practice of a pharmacy technician. So you go a scope down. So wherever you are approved for training, there you are practicing as a pharmacist under supervision. Where you are locuming, you are practicing the scope of practice of a pharmacy technician. Hope that makes sense. You are not registered as a pharmacy technician. You are registered as a pharmacist intern, but for the purposes of locuming, you can access the scope of practice of a pharmacy technician. This also means that you will not be allowed, or you will not be given a certificate that says that you are a pharmacy technician. So if you wish to locum, and wherever you are intending on locuming, they request that you provide them with a certificate of some sort for the pharmacy technician, we unfortunately cannot provide you with that, because you can only have one registration, which is that of a pharmacist intern, and you have access to the scope as per the regulations. Now, for the academic interns and the manufacturing or wholesale interns, when they are doing their 400 hours in a pharmacy, they are there as a pharmacist intern, meaning that they practice the scope of a pharmacist under supervision for that purpose. So if you are there for the purpose of the 400 hours, you will function as a pharmacist. However, if you are there for locum, then you are a technician. I am truly hoping that that makes some sense. And then once you are now almost done and you have met all the requirements of internship, that is, you have submitted and deemed successful on all your 6 CPDs, you have written the pre-reg exam and passed it, your tutor has submitted all your progress reports, favorable progress reports, and then you have also been an intern for a minimum of 365 days, then you can start looking into what it is to be a pharmacist. Therefore, you're going to go into the website again, registered persons, and then when you are on registered persons, you will then click on pharmacist, because now you have moved along an intern, or you're almost moving to being a pharmacist. When you click here, you'll be able to find all the information that you will need to know, the application form for CSP, and then you will then need to apply for CSP. CSP is not applied for through council, it is applied for through the ICSP. right? So this is the platform for DOH, for NDOH, and they handle the placements for CSP and not council. You only come to us once you have applied and then you've been placed, and you provide those supporting documents for us to register you as a CSP. However, we do not really do the placements ourselves. We only register once you have done so. So once you are towards the end or you're almost released, then just go in here to see what the requirements are, so that upon release you're able to apply, and then you are not delaying your placement process. After you've received your placement letter, then you come to us and apply for us to register you as a CSP. All right, that was a mouthful. Do we have any question that we can take now? Otherwise, you can send any question relating to this workshop or preparing for the exam or anything that was discussed today via this website, via this email address, pre-reg exams workshop at sapc.za.org. At the beginning, I did say that we would like for you to please complete the attendance register and also the forms, the survey. So I'm gonna stop sharing now. However, if there are any questions, and also please on WhatsApp, please follow the SAPC WhatsApp channel. That's where we post whatever updates that we have from our side. So if you want to know anything that we are doing, please do make sure that you follow the channel for the latest information. I'm going to stop sharing now so that I can be able to post the 2 links that you need. That is the survey and the registration forms. However, we are able to take any questions in the meantime. Ned, do we have any questions?
Elizabeth, there's a question. Can we use Google to look for reference sources?
Yes, you can use Google Chrome as a browser to go to a reference. But you know, like when you land on the platform, you cannot then click on it to search, like you cannot use the search bar to then find out what is. So you can go there to access a reference material, but you cannot go there to type the word paracetamol, if that makes sense. Any other
When it
question?
comes to booking for the practice exam, how do we do it? Are we only able to book for it after submitting 6 CPDs?
There are no requirements for booking the practice exam. Once the bookings have opened, we will notify interns that the booking for the practice exams are open, and then they will be able to book as almost the way they did for the workshop now. That means that they will go to the SAPC Council website, registered persons, pharmacist interns, log in, and then they will be able to book for the exams under their dashboard.
Today makes it 4 weeks before the date of the practice exam, but the last couple of days, the practice exam tab has had an error on the SAPC website. Will we be charged a fee for booking once it is working again to book for the practice exam?
The practice exam has no late booking fee. It's only the actual exam that has a late booking fee. So the practice exam has no late booking fee, and they will be able to book once it's opened. There will be no fee for it.
Isn't Chrome and Google the same thing, since you are saying we can use Chrome but not Google, if I heard well?
It is the same thing, but what I'm saying is when you use Google Chrome, right, you can go and type the reference that you are looking for, but do not go to the search part, the search engine part, and type a question in there. So you can go to it, say you want to access SAPRA, you can go to it to as means to an end of getting to the SAPRA website, but you cannot go to it and try to get the definition or the full word what SAPRA means or what SAPRA stands for.
Are we able to use an iPad instead of a laptop or desktop?
No, you need to have a laptop or a desktop. An iPad does not have all the features. You are not able to share from an iPad, which means that you will be able to pass all the requirements. But when it comes to sharing the screen, the iPad will not allow you to do that. So only a laptop or a desktop.
What would happen if the website goes down during the exam? I've heard of previous interns experiencing this with hardly any assistance from the council to rectify the issue.
Should we have technical issues, we do communicate with the interns quite promptly. If it's a nationwide issue, then we send SMSs to the interns. If it is an individualized issue that an intern is experiencing, their invigilator will assist them, and they are allowed to call customer care. They are allowed to text that WhatsApp number for them to get assistance. We usually have a full house of IT technicians. So if the issue is more technical, they will either ask that they give them their team viewer credentials and then they assist them where they are. So if ever there are technical issues, either that if the invigilator is able to resolve them, they will be resolved. Otherwise, they'll be escalated to the department, or they will then be escalated to IT. But we do go all out to make sure that whatever technical or whatever issue that the intern faces on the day is resolved quite promptly.
Is it permitted to use the second device, for example, a tablet, to access resources?
No, absolutely not, because on that second device, we're not able to see what you're doing. So once we notice that you are using a third device, in this case, whether it be an iPad or your cell phone, you will be notified. And if you refuse to stop, you will be kicked out of the exam. Only 2 devices are permitted. If you want to have electronic copies, make sure that they are on the device that you are sharing the screen for.
Are we allowed a second screen or monitor to view resources more easily during the exam?
No, you are not. You would have to then use the resources on a separate tab within the same monitor, but not a second one. As part of the violations, it will appear that you are using a second monitor, and you will be asked to disconnect the second monitor.
For the practice exam, should you also be confirmed competent in 3 CPDs?
No. For the practice exams, we do not have all the qualifying criteria do not apply. So the practice exams, you can write them even if you were registered as an intern yesterday, just to see how it looks like. We don't have a problem with that, because we believe that the more chances you get at practicing, the better prepared you will be. So the practice exam has no entrance criteria, so to speak. It must be an intern only.
If you have mental health issues, can you apply for extra time?
It would have to go through council. That means that you would have to send in a formal letter or formal request to the office. It will be reviewed firstly by the office, then it will go to committee. If council approves, then you will be given extra time, but it has to be approved by council. It's not a decision that the office can make by themselves.
Can you make yourself a formula sheet that's handwritten?
Yes, you can. It's an open book.
Are we allowed to use a split screen view with our exam and resources side by side?
Yes, you can. As long as whatever you are doing is on the screen that is shared and visible to your invigilator.
Will we be required to do the declarations and proctor settings in the practice exam?
Yes, you will go through them. It will be exactly the same as how the actual exam will be. That is the aim, for you to experience everything as it should be.
Is the practice exam going to be marked, and are we going to get results for it?
Yes, it will be marked, and you should have your results usually within a week or 2. The results will be released for the practice exam for you to be able to see how well you are doing and which area might require more of your attention.
If we write the exam at home, are we allowed to have someone in the room as long as they are quiet and do not interfere with the exam?
The correct answer is no. Preferably do not have anyone in the room.
I just want to make sure when we access online resources like EM Guidance, it will open a new tab in the browser. I just want to make sure that this is allowed, or how
Yes.
should we go about accessing resources online?
You can have multiple tabs open. Remember, all the tabs that you have open on the one monitor will still be appearing on the share on the shared screen, because when you share, you need to share entire screen. You will not be allowed to share a specific tab, but rather you'll have to share the entire screen. So you can have multiple browsers open, you can have multiple resources open, as long as all of that is happening within the one monitor that is shared, and you've shared the entire screen, so that we're able to record and see everything that you're doing on that one monitor.
Can you have a snack during the exam ready and next to you?
Yes, by all means.
What if my tutor submits the progress report late? How do we go about that?
You will not meet the requirements, and the system will not allow you to book. So we are having the workshop today. There's still a bit of time before August. Please have a talk with your tutors and make sure that they're able to submit your progress reports. If you do not meet any of the requirements, the system will block you from making the booking.
How does the progress report work for academic interns? What progress report must be submitted to be able to write the exam?
For academic interns, it's slightly different, but it is laid out for you in the intern tutor manual. However, remember, with academic interns, it can be up to 2 years, sometimes depending on when they get their achieved degree, but then they need to have submitted the minimum ones before they are able to write the exam. So if they are writing the exam within 6 months of them being within internship, because they can write their exam also in the second year of internship, is still fine. But if they are choosing to write now within the first 6 months, then they will also be within the 3 progress reports, being the 12th and the 4th and the 24-week one. But then if they are writing on the second year, then that means that they would have already been beyond the 9 months. That means that they would have met all the other progress reports. Maybe the outstanding one would be the achieved degree and the summary.
How do we register for the practice exam?
When the bookings are open, you'll be able to log into the secure site and book as you would have booked for this workshop or the actual exam.
Just to confirm, where do we find our most recent scope of practice for the exam?
If you go to the website under regulations or legislation.
If I submit a CPD on the 1st of July, is it correct in saying I will need to pay a late fee if I want to write the exam on the 5th and 6th of August?
Yes, because if you submit on the 1st of July, it'll probably be released on the 21st of July. And if you look at the 21st of July and the 6th of August, and you work your way back, it will mean that you are booking less than 4 weeks before the date of the exam, which means that you will be on that 2-week window period of the late booking. Then you'll have to pay the late booking fee.
Are we allowed to use physical copies of the SAMF and Merck manual?
Yes, ma'am.
Do the exam entry requirements have to be met by the date of booking or the date of the exam?
The date of the exam.
That's it. Oh, wait, there's one more. Are we able to submit the progress reports the tutor has? Are we able to see the progress reports the tutor has submitted?
Yes, when you log in on your side, you should be able to see the progress reports. But you can also ask your tutor to see if they're submitted. You can also call in or send an email to that email address, and we can check for you. You can even call customer care, and we'll be able to give you feedback as to how many progress reports have been submitted, which ones are still outstanding, when are they due.
The last question, if you wrote the June practice exam but can only write the October exam, do you need to write the September practice exam again?
You will not need to. However, it is advisable that you do, just to refamiliarize yourself with the process in case something has changed. But as far as the practice exam being compulsory, you will not need to, because you would have already written. So even if you write the practice exam in June, write the actual exam in October and are deemed unsuccessful, in August and are deemed unsuccessful, you don't have to write the practice in September before writing in October. But like I said, the more times you practice, the easier it is for you to navigate on the day, because also you get exposed to different questions, right? Because the questions are not the same. So you get exposed to, it becomes a bit of a more practice on the actual questions than anything else. But then no, you don't, it's not compulsory for you anymore.
Can we use our lecture notes as resources as well?
Yes, you can.
Okay, that's it, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much. Please, a reminder to complete both the survey and the attendance register, because that gives us feedback for the next session, and also the kind of information that we need to include. Some of it we might not necessarily prepare for the next session, but we might also put it on the website. So please, whatever input you might have, please put it through in the survey, and then please complete the attendance register. As you are aware, attending the workshop is also a prerequisite. It's also compulsory along with the practice exam. Thank you very much to everyone who has been here. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we wish you all the best with the exam and with the internship process. Please note that we are here should you need any type of assistance from council. We are here to support you. Tutors as well, we are here in case there is anything that you need assistance with, whether being it the platform itself, the process itself, anything that you need, we are here. Thank you very much. I know I'm a bit beyond time, but thank you for staying with us till the end. And we are done for the day. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Do please inform those that were not here able to attend that they can do so on Saturday at 9. And the presentation will be made available on the website. Thank you very, very much. Do enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you very much to everyone that was here. Dr. Johnston, thank you for your time. Team, thank you very much for the day.